Fatima's breath-fogged nursery window as sheets of monsoon rain hammered the glass, drumming out every other sound in the farmhouse. The twins, no, the triplets' room smelled of milk, talcum powder, and damp wood. 3 identical cribs sat in a row like miniature coffins, their curved railings casting lung-shaped shadows across the wall whenever lightning burst outside. She had rocked Lena first, then Mina, and finally Zoya, humming over each girl until eyelids fluttered shut. The storm had been gathering all afternoon, swollen clouds bruising the sky. But Rahan insisted on driving into town for more diesel for the generator. They had argued near the hen house. Fatima's voice cracked. Rehan's hand rose, then dropped to his side. "I'll only be an hour," he muttered, slamming truck door. Now, 4 hours later, he was still gone, and the power was out. A kerosene lantern glowed weakly on the dresser, painting everything in ochre and smoke. Thunder rattled cups in the kitchen. Fatima pressed fingertips to her temple, fighting a growing migraine, and whispered a prayer, "Ya Allah, keep them safe." As if in answer, a gust pried the back door open with a shotgun clap. She jumped, lantern jittering in her grip. From the hallway came a thumb-soft, deliberate "Rehan," she called. No reply, only the roof groaning under the downpour. She set the lantern on the floor, gathered her courage, and stepped toward the sound. Her slippers skidded on muddy footprints that hadn't been there minutes ago. Each one was adult-sized, bare, and headed straight for the nursery. Heart ricocheting, she ran. The door hung ajar. Inside, white curtains billowed, soaked dark at the bottom. Rain speckled the hardwood. Lena's crib was empty. Mina's empty. Zoya's empty. All 3 blankets lay folded with unnatural neatness, and the stuffed rabbit Fatima had stitched herself lay face down in a puddle. She screamed. The house answered with silence, a mute accusation. Instinct yanked her toward the window. Its latch was broken clean off, hinges twisted. Beyond, the yard dissolved into water, mango trees flailing under wind. Lightning revealed a sagging fence, and something small, drifting away, a scrap of pink ribbon. Rehan. She howled, but the storm swallowed his name. Adrenaline shoved her back down the hallway. She fumbled for the rotary phone, dialing the constable's number she remembered better than her own birthday. Each pulse of the dial felt like a second stolen from her daughters. When the line clicked alive, she gasped, "My babies took my babies." Sirens were impossible on those flooded roads, yet minutes later she heard distant wails, thin against thunderous sky. Outside, neighboring lanterns winked on. Villagers braving rain. Fatima collapsed by the front door, clutching the stuffed rabbit, its ears dripping. Rain hissed through the open doorway, needling her skin. All she could hear was the relentless hammer of water, and, beneath it, an echo 3 tiny heartbeats, now swallowed by the night. She was alone. She did not yet know that every question in her head would soon spiral outward, turning suspicion on the very people meant to save her. But flashing blue lights were already cutting across the flooded lane, heralding cradle of suspicion. Detective Nevadosin stepped from his jeep into ankle-deep water, rain slicking his cap and trenchcoat in seconds. The farmhouse loomed under the storm, its windows glowing dimly like eyes refusing sleep. Floodlight beams crisscrossed the mud, bouncing off soaked policemen and villagers murmuring behind a makeshift cordon. He was greeted by Constable Bashir, drenched and shivering. "No signs of forced entry, sir, except that window in the nursery. Latch is broken. We've secured the area." Naveed didn't reply. His eyes locked on a young woman standing barefoot. In the doorway, hair clinging to her face, rabbit toy crushed in her hand. She looked both fragile and unbreakable, like glass forged in fire. "Fatima Qureshi?" he asked softly. She nodded, lips trembling but not speaking. Naveed gestured toward the nearest constable. "Get her a shawl." Inside, the nursery reeked of storm and panic. Lightning framed the cribs in bursts. Naveed knelt beside one, observing the folded blanket. "To tidy," he murmured. "To deliberate." Fatima hovered behind him. "I didn't fold them." He turned slowly. "You're sure? Why would I fold their blankets? They were sleeping." Her voice cracked like dry wood. Was anyone else in the house? No, your husband. He left at 6 to get diesel, and hasn't returned. Navaid stood. You argued before he left. She hesitated. Yes, about. Her knuckles whitened around the rabbit. It doesn't matter. It does. Fatima's eyes burned. He accused me of being involved with someone. He slapped me. I told him to leave. Naveed glanced at the broken window, at muddy prints near the doorway. Something was off, not sloppy, but theatrical. Was there any trouble recently? Visitors? Threats? No, just the usual gossip. People don't like that we had girls. Triplets, he corrected quietly. Fatima flinched in the hallway. Constable Aliyah Khan was photographing the footprints. She was new, sharp, quiet, observant. Detective, she called, these prints. They're overlapping. Some go toward the nursery, but some loop back out. No matching child prints, no drag marks. So they walked out. Or were carried by someone careful. The storm began to die down, wind dropping to ragged sobs. Navaid stepped outside and scanned the darkness. The fence was broken. He followed the trail through the field, his torch catching a ribbon tangled on a branch, wet pink, frayed. Back inside, Fatima was swaddled in a borrowed shawl, rocking slowly on the floor. Aliyah crouched beside her. Do you think Rehan did this? She asked gently. Fatima's stare was hollow. If he did, I'll never forgive him. If he didn't, I'll never forgive myself. Morning peeled back the storm like a skin, mud hardened. Search parties combed the village and riverbanks. No sign, no sound. No ransom. By afternoon, Rehan returned, not to the house, but to the local clinic, bleeding from a gash on his temple. Claimed he skidded off the road, passed out near the canal, only just found his way back. He asked if Fatima was okay. He did not ask about the girls. In the interrogation room, Rehan sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Where were you last night? Naveed asked. I told you, near the canal. I crashed. It's all a blur. Did you and your wife argue before you left? Yes, she's paranoid. Paranoid about what? He smirked. About her brother. She thinks I know things I don't. Did you hit her? Silence. You didn't ask about the girls. Rehan's jaw twitched. Because I knew you'd blame me either way. Navaid left the room, disturbed by the performance. Outside, Alia stood by the nursery window, staring at the hinge. Sir, she said, this wasn't just broken, it was unscrewed. In that moment, they both knew, the scene wasn't just suspicious, it was curated, and the real questions had only just begun. By the third day, the triplets' photos were plastered on tree trunks, rickshaw backs, and even mosque walls. 3 identical faces, the same gap-toothed smiles, framed under the bold word, missing, but beneath every pinned poster, was a silent truth. Hope was already bleeding out. Navid leaned against the boundary wall of the farmhouse, sipping tea gone cold. Behind him, search dogs sniffed the last of the muddy tracks, but the trail had long gone stale. No footprints, no tire marks, no ransom call, only waterlogged soil and speculation inside the station. Constable Aliyah was running on 2 hours of sleep and sheer indignation. She scanned a new report and looked up. Sir, you'll want to see this. On her desk lay a sooty remnant, a burnt scrap of fleece, pink with cartoon bunnies. Found near the canal, half buried under reeds. Clothing, Navaid asked. Could be matches, the pattern Fatima described for Zoya's sleeping suit. He stared at it. Blackened edges. Still smelled of petrol. It hadn't just drifted downriver, it had been destroyed. Erased. When he returned to the farmhouse that evening, Fatima was curled on the veranda, staring at the horizon like someone waiting for a ghost. Her mother sat beside her, reciting Tasbih beads in a whisper. Naveed crouched. Fatima, I need to ask again. Are you absolutely sure no one in your family, brother, cousin, maid could have been involved? No one, she whispered. They were loved. He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. You said you argued with Rehan about your brother. Why? She didn't look up. Rehan, Suspected, Khalid of something. He said he caught him staring at the girls. It wasn't true. Khalid would never. Silence stretched. And Rihan, was he ever cruel to them? Now she looked at him. To them, never, to me, always. That night, the town held a prayer vigil under the banyan tree. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Men exchanged wary glances. A mullah recited from the Quran, but even the verses couldn't drown out the storm inside their minds if it wasn't strangers. It was someone among us. The media caught wind on day 5. Vans rolled in from Lahore and Islam. Headlines screamed triple tragedy, intently Anwala, and satellite dishes flowered on rooftops. Fatima single quotes as face was everywhere. She became a symbol of maternal agony until her past surfaced. Whispers of postpartum depression, of sedatives, of voices she claimed to hear during the last pregnancy. Overnight, sympathy curdled into suspicion. One anchor asked on live TV, could a mother's madness be behind the disappearance? Navaid watched the segment with a sinking heart. By the second week, the crowds disappeared. So did the reporters. Hope had a Rihan stopped attending search meetings. Instead, he drank at a local dubba until closing, muttering to anyone who'd listen. She wanted sons, not girls. She said it. Over and over. Aliyah brought it up the next day. Do you think he's deflecting? She asked, desperately. Navaid replied, and the community. They've made up their minds. And minds don't change, they calcify. But Aliyah hadn't given up. One night, flashlight in hand, she returned to the riverbank alone. That's when she found it, a child's shoe, size 1, wedged behind a stone, coated in ashdot back at the lab. Traces of accelerant confirmed it. Burnt with intent, she brought it to Navaid. Someone's trying to erase them, she said. Not just hide them, wipe them. Navaid looked down at the tiny shoe. For a long time, he didn't speak. We're not looking for missing children anymore, he finally said. We're chasing a burial. As summer thickened, a kind of hush took over the town, a silence where once there were lullabies. The wind whistled through the cracked rafters of the old farmhouse, whispering secrets only termites remembered. Sahir and Mariam stood hand in hand at the edge of the overgrown yard, staring at their new home, a weather-beaten two-story structure choked in ivy, its wooden shutters askew like tired eyelids. For most, it was an eyesore. For Sahir, a real estate bargain. For Mariam, a fresh start after her miscarriage in Lahore. Neither knew what the house had been. The real estate agent hadn't mentioned the word missing. Only vintage charm. And good bones. Inside, sunlight filtered through dusty drapes, illuminating floating moats like ghostly dancers. Mariam sneezed twice. Bless you, Sahir said, hauling in a paint bucket. Don't bless me, burn this house, she joked. But her smile faltered as she stepped into the upstairs hall. Something about the nursery door still painted a faded sky blue made her hand pause on the knob. She opened it. 3 identical cribs sat along the wall. The wood, warped from age, moaned slightly. Stuffed toys stared from shelves, stitched, eyes still. A hand-painted mural of a rabbit faded into peeling wallpaper. Why would they leave this all behind? She whispered. Creepy, Sahir muttered, poking his head in. We'll gut it. Turn this into a reading room or something. They didn't know the town still called it the cursed house. That the triplets' names were carved into an oak tree just beyond the fence. Or that old Fatima now lived in silence in a mental care home 30 kilometers away, combing invisible hair from invisible children. Asterisk meanwhile. In a 1-bedroom flat above a pharmacy in Faisalabad, a retired detective, Naveed Osen, sat surrounded by his journals, 2 shelves of files, maps, and unsolved cries pressed between paper, case file, Qureshi triplets, status, cold updated last. Never. He thumbed through the worn binder, staring at the photos. 3 girls, identical dimples, chubby cheeks. The rabbit toy between them, he had failed them. The guilt still coiled around his lungs, heavy and permanent. The department had declared it unresolved, no bodies, no confession, no closure. But he had never stopped thinking about the bathroom. Tiles, they'd retiled the floor just months before the disappearance. New porcelain laid oddly cheap grout, rushed job. Rayhan had said it was for a fresh start. The invoice never surfaced. Navaid had asked twice, then dropped it when other leads screamed louder. He lit a cigarette, coughed, regretted both. When the phone rang, he nearly didn't answer. Detective Ossen. The voice was unfamiliar. A woman, nervous. I'm calling from Tandlianwala. We just bought a farmhouse. Something's strange. Naveed sat up. What kind of strange? There's a smell. From the bathroom floor. We cracked a tile, and he was already pulling on his coat. Asterisk, asterisk, back at the farmhouse. Mariam stood frozen at the bathroom threshold. Her sledgehammer lay by her foot. The tile split open like a skull. From beneath rose a smell thick with rot and chemical bitterness. Sahir ran in. What the hell is that? She didn't speak. Couldn't her eyes were locked on the patch beneath the broken tile, a square of cement, unlike the rest. Lighter grey, rushed, different, I think. She whispered, barely able to hear herself. I think someone buried something here. Asterisk, asterisk, as Naveed's taxi crawled into the Knowsley P village, nobody noticed. Nobody stared. They'd forgotten his face. Forgotten the case, but he hadn't. The farmhouse awaited him like an old sin unconfessed. And as the door creaked open, dust spiraled upward, disturbed for the first time in 15 years. Show me, he said, and Mariam pointed. Straight to where the floorboard whispers. The forensic crew arrived at dawn. Navaid watched them set up through the same window he'd once leaned into during the original search. Everything felt smaller now except the silence, which had only grown heavier. Mariam hovered by the door, arms folded tight across her chest, her fingers pinching the ends of her sleeves. She hadn't slept. She couldn't stop smelling it, that sweet, metallic rot soaked into her sinuses. Can we stay somewhere else while they work? She asked. Please do, Naveed said, not unkindly. This won't be easy. She looked at the floor again, then left without another word. The team began carefully removing the tiles, first around the cracked one, then farther out. Beneath lay a rectangular cement slab, about 4 feet wide. Newer than the rest, sloppily poured, unmarked except for 3 shallow indentations, like something heavy had settled inside before the concrete dried. Naveed crouched beside the slab. 3, he murmured. Even in death, still together. Aliyah arrived with 2 black coffees and her usual unflinching energy. Forensics called us in. No, he said, taking the cup. I called them off the record. Her eyebrows rose. Going rogue again, sir? Naveed's eyes didn't leave the slab. If we go by protocol, this gets lost in red tape for another 15 years, she nodded. Good, protocol sucks. Asterisk, asterisk, by noon, the slab was cracked open with surgical precision. The first shovel released a breath from the ground, wet, sour, and unmistakably organic. Flies swarmed in immediately, drawn like memories to wounds. Naveed leaned in, using his handkerchief to block the stench. Inside, wrapped in old plastic sheeting and layers of duct tape, were 3 skeletal bundles. The room darkened, not physically, just the sensation, a weight pressing into everyone's chest. They uncovered the remains one at a time. The skulls were small, misshapen by years of weight and moisture. Long decayed scraps of fabric still clung to bone-pink lavender, pale yellow. Then Aliyah found it, a tarnished bracelet, partially embedded in one of the wrist bones. She brushed it off. Carefully, LMZ, she whispered. Naveed stared at the engraving. The initials of the triplets. This wasn't a crime scene. It was a tomb. Asterisk, asterisk, hours later, the remains were bagged and labeled. The bathroom, now a sterile excavation pit. Mariam and Sahir were relocated to a guest house in the village. Naveed and Aliyah sat on the front steps, their boots muddy, gloves discarded. We found them, she said, quietly. Yeah, Naveed exhaled. Now we find out who buried them. What's your gut say? He was quiet a long time. Then, the father vanished 2 months after the girls. Fatima was institutionalized. The brother Khalid refused interviews, but someone laid them down gently. This wasn't rage. It was desperation. Aliyah tilted her head. You think the mother did it? I think someone tried to preserve them and hide them. That too. Behind them, the wind picked up. The shutters banged lightly. A loose toy rolled down the upstairs hallway, clattering once. Naveed didn't even flinch. In a government-run psychiatric home 30 kilometers away, a nurse wheeled Fatima down a long corridor for her scheduled medication. The TV in the common room was left on. The evening bulletin played without sound. But the images, 3 tiny skeletons being pulled from a floor. Police tape, the farmhouse's unmistakable outline were loud enough. Fatima stared, eyes locked. Her hands began to shake. The nurse leaned in. Miss Fatima, are you all right? Fatima didn't respond. She lifted one trembling hand and placed it on her chest. Her mouth moved. No sound came. But if you could read lips, you'd make out the words. They found them. And behind her eyes, something ancient stirred. The city morgue smelled like bleach and secrets. Forensic pathologist Dr. Zahra Malik was in no mood for either. Her gloved fingers moved with the precision of a surgeon and the reverence of someone unwrapping a time capsule, except this time capsule held the remains of 3 children. Encased in rot, time, and grief. The bags were opened under sterile lights. Bone fragments were cleaned, separated, categorized. Each set of remains was so small, so light, it made the room feel heavier. She didn't say much, she never did. But as she laid out the girl's remains on 3 identical steel tables, even she had to pause. The symmetry was unbearable. Detective. Naveed stood behind the glass with Alia, watching the process in silence. You ever seen anything like this? She asked. He nodded. Once, back when I was green, a mother in Jalem poisoned her 2 children, then turned herself in. She said she couldn't afford to feed them anymore. But she kept their clothes folded for years, wouldn't let anyone throw them away. Alia looked at him sideways. This feels worse. It is. Dr. Zahra entered the observation room minutes later, unzipping her coveralls. Her expression was unreadable. They were girls, no older than 18 months, she began. Time of death matches the storm night from 15 years ago. 10 to 11 p.m. Cause of death appears to be suffocation. No blunt trauma. No broken bones. No defensive injuries. Suffocated how? Naveed asked. Likely manually, by a pillow or hand. Duct tape was present, but used post-mortem to bind the remains, not to silence them. Alia flinched. There's more. Dr. Zahra pulled a small Ziploc bag from her coat pocket. We found this. Inside one of the plastic wrappings, inside was a tiny charm bracelet. Metal corroded, but the letters still visible. LMZ. Naveed's eyes locked on it. Confirmation. I'd bet my license, Zahra said. They were placed. Intentionally, not dumped. Someone arranged them together, facing the same direction, wrapped in their sleep clothes. It wasn't rage, it was ritual. Or guilt, Alia whispered. Zahra looked at her. Both back in her apartment that night, Alia stared at the forensic photos until her head throbbed. The way the bodies had been laid out, the bracelet, the lack of violence. She opened the cold case file again, flipping to a name she hadn't thought much about, Khalid Mohammed. Fatima's brother, lived in the same house. Close with the girls, yet completely absent from follow-up interviews. Something was off. She called Naveed. What if we've been wrong about the father? He sighed into the phone. I've been wrong about everyone, at least once. Alia stood, pacing. Khalid, no interviews, no alibi. He disappeared from town after the funeral prayer. But a week before the girls vanished, he withdrew $120,000 in cash. No explanation. And get this, he worked construction, specializing in tiling. The line went silent. Then, find him. Meanwhile, in her psychiatric ward bed, Fatima's eyes refused to close. She stared at the ceiling as if expecting it to split open and pour her babies back to her. A nurse came in to check her vitals. Fatima whispered. I can still feel their hands in mine. The nurse paused, unsure if it was a hallucination or a confession. But Fatima added, they weren't supposed to go like that. Like what? The nurse asked gently. but Fatima shut her eyes tight, like animals. In the floor, at a rented flat 2 towns away, Khalid Mahound locked his front door. Unaware, a photo of him was being faxed to every nearby police station. He poured himself a glass of water, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "I buried the truth." But it's crawling out. Khalid Mahound was arrested without incident. No gun, no chase, no drama. Just a man already drained of fight. He didn't even ask why, just sighed. Like he'd been waiting for this knock at the door since 1997. At the station, he sat across from Aliyah and Naveed, flanked by silence. His hands trembled only slightly, but his eyes were calm. "To calm you know why you're here," Naveed said. Khalid nodded. "Yes." Aliyah leaned forward. "The triplets, the floor, the bracelet, the tiling work. Start talking." Khalid exhaled through his nose, voice hoarse. Rihan was going to sell them. The words dropped like glass. "To who?" Aliyah's tone sharpened. "I don't know. Some man in Lahore, private buyer. Rayhan told me it was just adoption. I didn't believe him. I told Fatima, and..." "What did she say?" "She didn't say anything, not right away." His voice cracked. "But that night, she called me. She said Rayhan tried to take them, that he hit her again. She said she stopped him." "Stopped him how?" Naveed asked. "She drugged him with sleeping pills. She always had some left over from her depression. She said she gave him enough to knock him out. Then she ran to the nursery to pack the girl's things. But Rihan woke up." Khalid paused, eyes watery now. "What happened next?" Aliyah asked. "She said he tried to grab Zoya from her arms. She panicked, said she couldn't let him take them, not to strangers, not to be lost forever, so she smothered them." One by one, a sound escaped Aliyah's throat, part gasp, part curse. She said they didn't suffer, that they didn't cry, just went quiet. Naveed stared at Khalid. "And you believed her?" "No. I didn't want to, but when I arrived, they were already gone." She was on the floor, holding the rabbit and whispering as the girls were laid out next to her, wrapped in their blankets. She said it was mercy, that no one would understand. "And the bathroom floor, I told her we had to hide them, that if people found out, she'd be stoned. Or worse." Rihan was still unconscious. "We poured the cement that night. I'd just finished a job in Malton, had bags in my truck." "You poured concrete over 3 infants," Aliyah said, voice shaking. "And then lived with yourself for 15 years. "No," Khalid said softly. "I didn't live. I just didn't die." Meanwhile, word of the arrest spread like wildfire. The town erupted grief, reanimated into fury. Some blamed Khalid, others, Fatima. Some even mourned Rihan, though whispers said he fled because he knew what had happened. Naveed sat with Aliyah that night, both nursing bitter tea and heavier hearts. "She loved them," Aliyah said. "I believe that, but what she did, she was cornered," Naveed replied. "But love twisted by fear becomes something monstrous. She never had a chance to speak her truth," Aliyah murmured. "And now she might never get it." At the psychiatric ward, Fatima's nurses turned off the news. Too late, she'd already seen Khalid's face on screen. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "He didn't bury them for me. He buried me with them." The case was reopened formally. Murder, accessory, obstruction. Forensics matched cement samples. Bank records showed Rihan had wired money and marked anonymous deposits. Everything spiraled outward. But in the end, it wasn't just a crime, it was a family collapsing under secrets, and the trial hadn't even begun. The interrogation room was dim, cold and quiet except for the hum of the ceiling fan, spinning. Like time, just trying to move on. Khalid sat hunched, shadows etched across his face. But this time, the silence didn't belong to him. Across the table sat Fatima. She had been brought in under heavy supervision. Her wrists trembled in their cuffs, yet her eyes were glassy, not vacant. Not anymore. When she saw him, her first words were not a greeting. You folded their blankets. Khalid looked up, jaw locked. Yes, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have killed them. A needle of silence pierced the room. Naveed and Aliyah watched behind mirrored glass, barely breathing. Fatima exhaled like she had been underwater for 15 years. He was going to take them, Rihan. He had buyers, not parents' buyers. I told you we could leave, Khalid whispered. We could have run, started over. With what? Your welding jobs. My bad brain, 3 baby girls in a country. That already treats daughters like sin. She laughed bitterly. We weren't a family, we were prey. You could have told the police, he snapped. They would have taken the girls anyway. Put them in some dirty orphanage. Or back to Rihan, or to strangers who don't know how to say Zoya properly. Her voice cracked. I thought I was saving them. I thought, if I could just hold them one last time. You didn't save them, Khalid hissed. You erased them. Fatima's head dropped. Her fingers twisted together, pale and clawed. I buried them warm, she said. I didn't let them go cold, alone. Asterisk, behind the glass. Aliyah blinked hard. She's gone, she whispered. Naveed didn't answer. He was watching Khalid, not Fatima. Something in the man's body language shifted guilt, yes, but also fury. Resentment that had fermented into something else. She never let me hold them, Khalid had once confessed during intake. Not really, not like a father. Now, he watched her crumble, and his silence said, you don't get to fall apart. You already did that with them. Asterisk, Fatima was returned to the ward that evening. Heavily sedated. She hummed something as they wheeled her away, a lullaby. Off-key and desperate. Khalid, on the other hand, went back to his cell. Eyes bloodshot but wide open. Aliyah visited him the next morning with a recorder. Are you ready to give a formal statement? He nodded slowly. But, I want something first. What? The truth told properly. All of it. I'll testify. I'll name names, Rihan the buyers. The neighbor who knew but stayed quiet. The cleric who blessed silence instead of seeking justice. I want it on the record. Aliyah narrowed her eyes. Why now? Khalid leaned in. Because silence doesn't protect the innocent. It buries them. Asterisk, that evening, Naveed sat on the farmhouse porch, the rabbit toy-molded, weather-dressing beside him. The new family had moved out, vowing never to return. No one blamed them. He stared out across the field, where villagers used to whisper about the triplets, as if even saying their names might summon tragedy. But now they had names again. They had voices, and soon they would have justice. Asterisk, in a dark cell, Khalid stared at his reflection in the steel toilet. He whispered their names like a mantra, Lena, Mina, Zoya. And for the first time in 15 years, he let himself cry, not for what he did, but for what he didn't do when it might have mattered. The courtroom was old, cracked, and sun-bleached, but it was packed like a festival tent. Reporters elbowed each other for position. Aunties whispered behind depotas, men crossed their arms, tight, staring like jurors with pitchforks instead of pens. The state versus Khalid Mahmoud. The state versus Fatima, Qureshi. The charges, homicide, concealment, obstruction, conspiracy. The real trial, memory, motherhood, masculinity. Fatima was wheeled in on day 1, ghost pale, in a plain cotton shalwar kameez, lips colorless. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't even blink when someone in the back shouted, "Child killer." Khalid entered next, flanked by 2 officers. He looked worse, gaunt, hollow-eyed, like the guilt had begun to feed off him. But when he sat down, he nodded once to Naveed, in the back row. It was time. The prosecution painted a picture of madness. A mentally unstable mother. A jealous, controlling uncle. A violent father who vanished before he could be questioned. Fatima Qureshi, the lawyer declared, was emotionally volatile, untreated, for severe postpartum psychosis, and manipulated her brother into burying her crimes. The jury squirmed. Some nodded. Others looked away. When it was the defense's turn, Khalid took the stand himself. My sister was abused. Rihan hit her, starved her, locked her inside. He planned to sell the girls. I confronted him, he laughed. Told me daughters are only valuable when sold. Fatima begged me not to go to the police. She said no one would believe her. He paused, eyes fixed on no one in particular. She wasn't a monster. She was a mother who cracked beneath the weight of a world that offered her no shelter. A ripple of discomfort passed through the gallery. Aliyah testified next. I've been in law enforcement 5 years, she said, and I've seen what silence does to women. Fatima didn't just kill those girls. The whole town did. Every time they looked away. Every time someone said, Pata hai, Uska shoha, Gusa kata hai, and did nothing. The judge struck the line. But the gallery heard it, loud and clear. The most explosive moment came when a new witness came forwards, Sakir Kazi. The man who once tiled the farmhouse bathroom before Khalid finished the job. I was called in to do repair work, he said. But I left early, felt weird, something off. Heard crying from the nursery, but Rehan told me to mind my own business. Did you report it? The judge asked. No sir. I needed the money. My wife was pregnant. His voice broke, but I heard those babies cry, and now I hear nothing. On day 6, Fatima finally spoke. No lawyers, no notes. Just her voice raw like it had been buried with her daughters. I know what I did. You don't need to tell me. I'm a murderer. I live with it. I don't want forgiveness. I want them back. She looked at the jury, the crowd, then straight at Naveed. You all came here for justice. But where were you when I begged for help? When my husband bruised my arms and no one blinked? Where were you when I screamed and screamed and screamed quietly? Number 1 moved. Fatima sat down, and the room stayed silent for a very long time. The verdict came 2 days later. Khalid Mahmood, guilty of obstruction and illegal disposal of remains. Fatima Qureshi, not guilty by reason of insanity, committed to permanent psychiatric care. The town split like a cracked mirror. Some said justice was served. Others said evil walked free. But none of them ever said the triplets' names aloud again, except Nav, Eed. He wrote them on the last page of his journal. Lena, Minna, Zoya, 3 names. 3 chances the world ignored. The farmhouse stood silent again. The ivy had thickened. The wind no longer whistled, it just sighed. Naveed returned alone. 15 years after the storm, months after the trial, and 3 weeks after Fatima stopped speaking altogether, she had passed away in her sleep. No final statement, no revelation, just stillness. Her last recorded words, they were always safest together. Inside. Dust blanketed the floors like snowfall. Naveed walked slowly, running his fingers along the walls like one might in an old mosque, half expecting the plaster to whisper names back at him. He reached the bathroom. The tile had been removed during the investigation. The hole patched, but no one touched the room since. It still reeked faintly of bleach, decay, and time. He sat down on the edge of the tub, placed the rabbit toy on the floor, and opened his notebook for the final time. He wrote, "There is no good ending to this, no neat headline, no victorious music, only this. The world failed them, one by one. But we remembered, and memory, I've learned, is its own kind of justice." He closed the book, didn't cry, couldn't. Instead, he walked to the nursery. The cribs were gone. The mural peeled nearly to nothing. But one thing remained on the inside of the closet wall. Scratched faintly into the wood, L+M+Z, hadn't been documented in the case files. Hadn't been noticed during the crime scene sweep. It was carved by a mother's hand. Or a child's dream. No one could know now. Naveed stood still, breathing in the quiet like incense. Then he whispered, "Rest," and left without locking the door. A year later, the farmhouse was razed. Developers wanted a resort, and no one objected. The town was tired of carrying ghosts, but before the wrecking crew arrived, a little girl wandered onto the property, a farmer's daughter, chasing her goat. She entered through the broken fence, wandered up the path, and stood before the bones of the house. She said later she felt warm inside, like someone was humming. Like someone was rocking 3 cradles at once. When asked if she was scared, she smiled. No, she said. They were just playing. Back in Faisalabad, Alia kept a photo on her desk. A copy of the triplets' picture. She never forgot the case. Never worked another quite like it. And whenever someone asked why she still wore the same badge, she said, because monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear wedding rings, and sometimes they cry while they do the worst things imaginable. Someone has to stay. Someone has to listen. Naved died 3 winters later, peacefully. His notebook, weathered, tear-stained, filled with truths no one wanted to hear, was found under his bed. The last page had only 1 sentence. They were loved. And, for the first time, maybe that was enough.